It's only through talking, it's only through getting together in person and being really honest and open about our experiences as women, whether we've had children, tried to have children, failed at having children. We need to talk about those so that the next election, people will fucking care.
Welcome to Actual People, a podcast hosted by me, Chauncey Zalkin, dedicated to meaningful conversations about the evolving landscape of our lives and the power of our own creativity and imagination to make magic. So this week, I've been taking my kids to tour middle schools. They're in 5th grade, and next year they're going to enter a whole new stage of their development. You know that feeling when you just can't get a read on what the right course of action is? I suspect that, like a lot of people, I have ADHD. And I wonder if this is, and I don't know if this is a term, contextual ADHD or situational ADHD that we all have because our phones have hijacked mental cohesion. My thoughts go in a kind of spiral vortex shape where bits and pieces of new ideas swirl in, and depending on the weight of them, it slowly changes the course of things. That's how I started this podcast. That's how I turned my attention from my fiction, hopefully very temporarily. That's up to me to get back on course and carve out that time to fix the things that are wrong with the latest piece I wrote. But other things are coming in and pushing that to the side. I'm always seeking and searching for this unnameable, unreachable thing. Do you understand that feeling? Do you ever get that? Most years, it's just not quite it. I don't quite reach the thing that I wanted to accomplish that year. I don't quite get to that level of flow where everything just comes together and everything on the list is just scratched off and I can create completely new things to go after. At least that's how it's been for at least the last decade, which is no coincidence because my kids are turning 11. But still, that's not always the case. In some situations, quite the opposite happens. I do hit that thing, that pace where the wind is at my back. One such time was moving to Paris and the decision leading up to moving to Paris. I had booked a flight to Paris to bookend my trip to go see a friend in Antwerp and to maybe go to another city. I can't remember. But I was going to visit this friend of mine. He was a very talented flower designer. He made art out of flowers and he was semi-famous. He had done a coffee table book and other things, and he was from Antwerp and was living there, but he had a contract in New York, and he had to cancel last minute. But of course, I decided to go to Paris anyway, and I found a writing workshop last minute in Paris to take up 5 days of my trip there. And so I joined that workshop, but I had a lot of time to kill. And so while I was there, it just dawned on me that it was time to move to Paris. This wasn't the first time that I had tried to move there, wanted to move there. I had been wanting to move to Paris since I was 15 years old. I was going to go to boarding school in France, and I got mono, and the whole plan fell apart, and I never moved there. And there were several other times where I attempted to move to Paris, and it didn't work out. In this stage of my life, I had already given up on Paris. I was in my early 30s, and I had decided I'm never going to live there. I had become such a New Yorker, and my life was in New York. I was just on a completely different path, and then I went on this vacation. And the timing of this vacation was that I had just gotten laid off from an advertising job where the agency I was at was merging with another agency. And I was just so fed up with the whole field anyway and didn't want to be in it anymore and was having a crisis of conscience about being in advertising. And it had reached a head. And then this trip comes along. I had sold my apartment in Brooklyn, so I had a little bit of cash on hand. And I wasn't married, and I didn't have kids. And all these things sort of came together, and I thought, this is it. I didn't even think this is it. I just knew, this is it. I'm moving to Paris. There was no thinking. I came up with the date January 15th. I figured it all out in quick succession. I got an apartment. I booked my flight. I got the right vet papers. I announced it to my parents, said goodbye to them. I planned a going away party, and then off I went. On January 15th, that was 2007, and I moved to Paris. The clarity was sublime. Also, in 2003, I made a line of dog hoodies, hooded sweatshirts for dogs, And I saw all of it in my head. I'm like, I'm going to make this little line of dog hoodies. And I went to the garment district and I picked out the sweatshirt material. I designed a couple different versions of it. I found a little sample room to sew them up for me. Also in quick succession, I got into New York Magazine's Best Bets. I got celebrity clients. I was featured in the Daily News. I got into stores on the Upper East Side and these little boutiques in Beverly Hills. I saw it all in my head. The steps I took were easy to figure out, and I was on a mission. It was a beeline. I was making a beeline for success in making those dog hoodies. It was a beeline towards moving to Paris. Everything lined up. I did not ask a lot of questions. I did not ask for people's approval. And what I didn't know, I could figure out. And boom, I got what I needed and I moved there. And everything felt like this was the moment in my life. I had climbed over a hill and I was looking out from the summit. But other times are way fuzzier. It's not been easy come for me in the world of publishing and getting a book deal or finishing subsequent books after the first one. Moving to Raleigh was something I sort of stumbled into. It was not a clear choice where I made that beeline to get here. It was more circumstantial, though pleasant. But going to pick schools for my kids has felt more like that moving to Paris dog hoodie moment. A couple of years ago, after the pandemic, we bought a house in Raleigh and we moved to a new neighborhood that had a new base school, which was also a magnet school, that had a much larger selection of electives. As soon as I walked into the school, there was an energy. It had this very cozy, nurturing energy to it. I also looked at the art and photography that lined the hallways, and there was a clear priority for diversity and multiculturalism that walked the walk of love and acceptance. And I just knew this is the place. There was no doubt in my mind that I wanted them to go to school here. Whereas the school that they had gone to previously was beautiful and newly renovated in a beautiful neighborhood, but it didn't have a point of view. The school felt like it was just phoning it in. It wasn't a closed-minded place, but there was no sense that it had an eye to the future. I could never get a read on what the administrators were thinking. There was no philosophy for how they were going to approach the challenges of modern society or how to set kids up to succeed, where this school had a proactive energy and an overwhelming sense of love and an intelligence. And now the same thing is happening again, going to look at magnet schools for middle school. This week we went to 2 schools. The first school we looked at, we were greeted at the door by student ambassadors who guided us into the building, and then another group of student ambassadors who took us into the library and explained what was going to happen. They explained that they were going to take us on a tour of the school and bring us back into the library. But first, the woman who ran the magnet program got up at the podium and spoke about the philosophy of the school and explained how the magnet program worked. And then at the end of the tour, the vice principal of the grade and the principal of the school spoke. There was no fumbling around with answers. Their operational model was intentional. The school provided so many options for interaction, so many points of discovery and ways for kids to carve a unique path for themselves through the school and get exposure to lots of different things in very considered, sophisticated ways. Nothing was overlooked. And then today we went to see a second school, which we heard was smaller and more intimate. But as soon as I walked in, I got these spiffy dentist office vibes, those kinds of buildings where there's big swaths of bright colors and it feels very much like you're being marketed to, but it doesn't feel warm or human. I got those vibes as soon as I walked in. There was no light in the corridors. There was no educational point of view. It felt like an afterthought. There was a math teacher that seemed very impressive as a teacher, but he made a few odd comments about his attitude toward the arts, which were quite dismissive, and that was a big red flag for me. It also had a weird schedule. So it was a hard no. I could see it on the kids' faces too. We all just knew. I was trying to keep my mouth shut until they gave me their take, but we all felt the same. Isn't that great, that feeling like when you know, and it doesn't come along every single day. It doesn't come along that often in your life where a decision just hits right and you know what you're going to do and you know why. I never had that in marriage or with love, ever. It always felt either iffy or downright like a big mistake that I was helpless to stop. A snowball rolling downhill, picking up speed kind of thing. No control. A lot of life feels like that. And I've been thinking of this phrase lately, Jesus, take the wheel. You know, putting out so much effort in life, and sometimes you just don't want to. You just want something to become clear to you or to appear in front of you. And it might be a lazy way of thinking, but sometimes you just want off the ride, off of the merry-go-round, and you want to be on solid ground. You want that kind of clarity. I am not religious, but that phrase has been going through my mind, Jesus, take the wheel, because there really isn't anything quite like it. You don't really have to believe in Jesus to have that resonate. I might not always be able to make a decision, but I would say that my gut is pretty attuned to the environment and makes pretty quick decisions about how I feel about something. I look at the world as a series of yes, no, yes, no. I will look at something and say, not for me. I look at something else and go, yes, for me. And on it goes, like a series of hallways at right angles. Creatively, I have so many divergent thoughts and ideas that can become frustrating. So to land on something that gives you that feeling like you're gliding on fresh powder, as opposed to hacking through a cornfield, that's a pretty nice feeling. I also want to say that I light up in school environments. When I was still in school, I wanted to become an academic. But unfortunately, I was so torn as to what path I wanted to take academically that I never ended up pursuing anything beyond a bachelor's. It would be natural for me to pursue anthropology or social psychology. But then again, I thought, what if I got an MFA from Iowa? But I'm entrepreneurial. Maybe I should get an MBA from Harvard. Completely opposite things and equally difficult to pursue. That's some pretty schizoid thinking right there. I didn't end up going on either one of those paths. I froze. I continued doing branding and marketing and doing writing workshops here and there. A lot of great stuff came out of it, but it is a hell of a lot easier when you have that certitude and you take decisive actions to get to a specific place. One thing I'm certain about is that I love learning. I love teaching. I love art. And I wonder why we don't get electives like that as an adult. I want to take sculpture and drawing and philosophy and engineering and entrepreneurship and robotics. I was sitting in that session the other day feeling like a baby adult dropped on her head. This public magnet school seems so much better to me than my own middle school, which is now, I looked it up, a top 100 school in the world. My high school and middle school, it's one school. It's now one of the top 100 schools in the world. But back in the mid to late 80s when I was in middle school, we just had the standard fare plus a language. But why don't we have more choice of continuous learning that just comes to us in our lives? Why don't we continue to get exposed to new things in some sort of structured way? And why isn't that a priority in our society? That's just something that I've been thinking about. Moving on to today's episode, though, I interviewed 3 women recently. They don't have titles before their names. They're not big media personalities. They're simply stepping into a new stage of personal power in different ways. They're all accomplished. They're all living for themselves and not some ideal of what they should be. They're masters of their own universe. One of these women, her name is Amy Reinhart. She was my most recent interview. There's no real reason why she skipped to the front of the line other than I started to edit the piece and now it's done. But I noticed her because she wrote a piece about her experience with postpartum depression 20 years ago in a long essay on LinkedIn. It wasn't a story that was sanitized or glossed over. It described a day that had her sitting frozen in front of a traffic light, unable to cope with the pressure and stress of new motherhood and the demands of a job that she loved that wasn't loving her back. A job that demanded in unspoken but very palpable ways that she somehow ignored the fact that she'd given birth. A workplace that pretended to have supportive policies, but ultimately didn't accommodate the inconvenience of contributing to the continuation of the human race. She never went back to that big corporate job or any big corporate job, even though she prepared for it through years of education. I know that sounds familiar because it's pretty common. But her essay was really raw, and it was long, and it was driven by emotion. It didn't hold anything back. It had so much detail. And it really struck me. Here's a little excerpt of something that she wrote. She said, "The light turned green, cars moved around me, horns chirped in quiet irritation, but I sat there frozen, not wanting to move forward at all." So, reading that, I reached out to her. I wanted her to come on the podcast. For a few years now, the rate of confessional writing on LinkedIn has accelerated in velocity and just sheer quantity. It usually feels formulaic or even strategic, like it came out of a sesh between a job seeker and one of the 11,300 career coaches in the US, or one of the 34,200 life coaches. These are stats that don't include all the coach hybrids and self-proclaimed gurus and whatnot. The financial numbers of the coaching industry range between 5 to 15 billion. A lot of the confessional essays on LinkedIn I personally find cringy. But I do think that daring to say true things is a really welcome trend that seems to be continuing unabated. The desire to reach and connect with people without veneer, it's encouraging. It gives me hope that we may have indeed turned a corner in the prominence of the glossy face of influencer culture. I hosted a women's dinner the week before Thanksgiving in my home. Now, I'd been saying I was going to do this since before I moved here in 2019 and bought a 9-foot table. I just never got around to it. Life, again, was carrying me down that river, mostly just raising my kids as a single mom, trying to keep getting consulting work and writing in my spare time and really just living my life. And I never had this dinner. It really changes when you have kids, I find, for you to do things for yourself that take any sort of planning, because I'm committing all my planning to helping my kids. But I finally did this, and it was the election, I have to say, that gave me that kick in the pants I needed to cook for a crowd. I knew 2 of the women well, and I didn't know the other women that much. One I had just met. She got her undergraduate late and is about to go to law school and is a single mom. And she just seemed really kick-ass, and we started talking, and I thought, okay, now's the time. I met this woman organically, and I just felt like, okay, I wanted to do this. And so I invited her, and I invited my 2 closest friends in Raleigh, and a writer that I had met months before, and a woman I had never met, but a mutual contact thought we should get in touch because we were both creative and had lived in Brooklyn, which is reason enough for me. And everyone fit like a glove. It was amazing. And what really struck me was the palpable sense of relief that everyone felt and the need that they had for such a dinner. There was no agenda. There was no organizing principle. It was just people, actual people, smart people, and all women. It was fun to walk back into that me before motherhood for an evening. My kids were here, but they didn't eat with us. They participated by making the name cards and taking a picture of us, but otherwise they watched movies and left us to talk about things other than kids. We talked about election emotions, we talked about food, we talked about the only attractive man I've seen in real life in the last 4 years, which I was very excited about, just to know that one exists. And when I was telling that story, one of my friends perked up. Tell me more. Sometimes this motherhood thing is hard. It's really easy to lose the lighthearted parts of yourself that have nothing to do with kids and just have fun. But that was a really fun night for us. I also had fun talking to Amy, who, just like her essay, was completely unvarnished, raw, and real. Take a listen.
I haven't washed my hair in 3 days. I'm just literally showing up and seeing where this door that you opened for me takes us. I think the reason that you and I connect and connected is when you reached out to me, I heard that rawness, right?
Nice. You're willing to open up almost completely on LinkedIn. Most people who write those confessionals on LinkedIn, I feel like a lot of them are, hire me at the end, because it is LinkedIn.
I thought, well, let's put it out there.
I like that. Where do you live? Are you in Massachusetts?
Yeah, I'm in the Boston area. I grew up.
I just totally threw that at the wall. I had no idea.
Yeah, no. I grew up in Wisconsin, in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and then I moved out after college, and my life has been here ever since. I love it. I love this area.
Yeah. So I do too. I left New York City and I moved down to South Carolina because I left my husband when my babies were a year old from New York City. We had a business together.
Oh my gosh.
I had left everything behind and went to live in Beaufort, South Carolina for 4 years and took a job back in advertising again. I bought a house down there and then it was way too conservative for me.
Right.
And when they finished preschool, I came to Raleigh, North Carolina right before the pandemic to try it out. But I was really going to go up to the Hudson Valley. My ex-husband lives in the Catskills and I never made it up there. I'm still in North Carolina in
Oh,
Raleigh.
wow. Wow.
But I always think I belong in New England. I went to school in Vermont. My family is from upstate New York and Maine. I always wanted to go back there, that direction. Now I'm here and the weather's so manageable and people are nice and educated and there's no real reason to leave, but I still feel like I belong in the Northeast.
Yeah, I love Vermont too. There's something about being around people who share values. The election was certainly something that gave me that extra push to start using my voice in a way that I hadn't before. Not every hour that I spend or a conversation that I have has to lead towards something transactional. If
This is a part of the problem of capitalism.
right.
It changes the dynamic between people.
And I think it changes the dynamic for women, especially because our financial freedom gives us exit power. It gives us exit power out of negative relationships, negative marriages, negative working relationships. And we all know, and there's a lot of data to support that women, whether you're founding a company and you're looking for capital or you are negotiating for a position, it's stacked against us. That financial piece, especially for women, gives us the freedom to make better choices.
Yeah, exactly. My central dilemma, it's always been creativity or money. That's how I ended up in advertising and eventually in marketing. That's how I got paid. People do things for money instead of doing them just for the love of them. There's always that voice in your ear telling you that how much is this worth?
Right. Right. Well, and I love it that you said, how much is this worth? I'm not the breadwinner, but I have equity in what I've created in my marriage so that we have bread on the table. Do you see what I'm saying?
Of
So
course.
you can read that in my story on postpartum depression. I've been married 25 years, and because of circumstances and forces in the world, we had to make some choices, and it led us into this position where we're really focused on my husband's career because he had the potential to make the most money and I had the potential to carry the children.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I read your
So
story about how you worked for a tech company and you were basically ostracized or all this weight was put on you about, oh, you're going to have babies.
it was this trajectory of the company at the time. The financial opportunity, if we stayed there, was incredible. They may have had some policies at the time that were a little bit more ahead of the game than others, but at the same time, the culture didn't support it. You know what I mean?
Right. It's sort of
And
like it doesn't quite fit. It,
exactly. And there was no remote work. There were, people couldn't communicate like you and I are communicating over Zoom. This was 25, 26 years ago. So you got up in the morning and you went to work. And if you couldn't do that because you had a postpartum body that wasn't going to cooperate, or a pregnant body, or sick children at home, or you didn't want to lug a baby, a 3-month-old baby in the car for an hour and a half twice every day and pay $2,000 a month in childcare, was probably more than that, then you had to make some very important choices. That's what was available. Fast forward 25 years, and you're looking and going, wow, that decision that I made to leave that company really did impact me. It shaped everything. And
well, you're lucky that I presume that you're in a
yep,
good marriage that you want to be in.
yep,
But if you didn't,
right. That's a whole other ballgame, right?
yeah, I don't know if I had postpartum depression or not. I guess in retrospect, I might have because I felt like I was in a living hell. Was it the twins? Was it the fear of something bad happening to them? I never felt any anger or rage towards them at all. I felt
Yeah.
scared something bad would happen to them. And I also just felt depressed. When I would nurse, the letdown of the milk would make
Ugh.
me feel like,
Ugh.
yeah, the worst.
Right.
Still can't hear that. Woof, woof.
I think there's a couple of things that people get wrong. One is that, oh, it's the crying after you have a baby. I mean, no, that's not what it is. I mean, it can be so severe and long term. In my case, it actually started while I was pregnant. And then the other thing are the most extreme cases. And when we hear about it, my heart breaks. My heart breaks for everybody. It breaks we just had a situation, I think, here in Massachusetts, which is heartbreaking. I won't repeat it, but my heart breaks for the husband. Obviously, my heart breaks for the children and the family. But when I think about the agony that mom was going through, I just, and she didn't tell anybody. Nobody noticed.
I know. Why is it so taboo for women not to be like Betty Crocker? I mean, it seems like a long time now since the 50s.
Right.
Whether it's being ready for the meeting or dinner
Yeah.
on the table on time, why are we still attached to that, to the taboo of being human when men can have dad bod and
Right. And women can't.
I don't know.
We're coming up on Thanksgiving, and I tell the story about my own perfectionism and how we carry that and how it just drives us insane. And what we tell ourselves that being a good mom or a good wife or a good cook or, whatever, how that just eats us.
I read that you don't like cooking.
Right. That is true.
And I think that you're only good at things if you really like doing them.
Yes. But also when you're a perfectionist and that's your role, and it was my role because that's just how we divided and conquered, all the responsibilities in our marriage.
So you felt like it was your job. See,
Absolutely.
And it
So
becomes transactional.
I was going to be great at it because it was my job. But I've never enjoyed it. I talk about the resentment that builds, and it eventually comes to this screaming moment that you do that for 2 decades. And all of a sudden you're like, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah. What do you really like doing?
So I have a bachelor's in Spanish and International Affairs.
You did go back to work after you left this big job when you were pregnant.
So when I was pregnant, no, I went to work at a health and fitness club, and I did just every kind of role imaginable.
After you had your babies?
After I had my babies, yep.
So you left a big tech job. Well, I just want to,
Yep,
okay.
I left a tech job, yep, had children, and spent a lot of time at this local health and fitness club. Okay. And because I spent so much time there, in the front of the group exercise classes, they eventually said, do you want to come and teach and work here? So I taught yoga and spin there for a while. And then another job came available in programming, and then moved into a couple different roles, eventually working as chief engagement officer and program director. A year and a half into COVID, when everybody got vaccinated, I went to work for a company that owns businesses in a lot of different spaces. I became their chief marketing officer, and I did that for 2.5 years. I moved on to work with a friend of mine who owns a PR agency. I came on board as a chief marketing officer and just sort of felt like there wasn't the type of work that I was going to be able to make an impact and be a valuable contributor to the company. So I left in March and just sort of figuring out what I want to do at this point.
Do you like marketing?
Do I like marketing? I think I'm a natural marketer. I've been building a community for about 3 to 4 years of people who support me. A lot of executive level women, a lot of executive level men.
I was in Chief for a while. Have you heard of Chief?
Oh my God, I love Chief. So I've been at Chief 3 years.
Oh, you're in Chief?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's been life-changing for me in so many different ways. Mostly that community and helping to build that community and find different opportunities and people that are doing cool things like you are. But also there's the community that I have here in Boston. When I close my eyes and think of the 3 or 4, 5 women who are closest to me that I would call my best friends, they all came through that community. They're all Chiefs.
Wow.
And they're the people that I would call if I was like, I need a place to stay, I need some money, would you pick me up at the airport? Like, when life,
I need some money, I need a getaway car.
Right? Those are your friends, right? When you can go, oh shit, I really need help right now. Who do you call? Who are the people that you call? And all of those friendships came through Chief.
Wow. I don't have any friends in Raleigh from Chief.
Yeah.
But I do have a friend who I've never met, but we talk all the time in Charlotte, who used to live in New York, also has twins, and we met through Chief.
Yeah, there's a pretty big community here in Boston. I would say there's maybe 1,000 Chiefs, and we're pretty tight. A couple months ago, I went with my sister. We're both in our early 50s and sat in on a conversation led by a woman. Her name is Edie Pasalis. And Edie is just incredible. And she's doing all this work on midlife transformation as it relates to menopause and not perceive it as a negative, but really an opportunity to grow. And I've connected with her a couple of times too.
How have you found menopause to be?
I'm in a good spot right now. I'm a big believer for me in hormone therapy. I have an estrogen patch, which has been
Mm.
a lifesaver. I pre-gamed a lot of this information in my mid 40s. As soon as I started having any kind of wacky symptom, I found the right doctor and I was like, please give me estrogen. And there was no problem with that. I've had very few issues, if any. But I don't like thinking about being 51, right? I feel like, shit, I've got 10, 15 years of whatever I'm going to do. I feel like I have to do it now. And I don't like feeling that pressure. Nobody does. But at the same time, it might be more of a wind at my back to start making changes that I want to make because we don't have an endless amount of time and we're not guaranteed tomorrow. But assuming I live till 80 or 90, I feel like the next 10 or 15 years are going to be the best for me in terms of just being able to physically do what I want to do.
What are some of the things physically that you want to do?
One thing that's been on my bucket list for a long time is Machu Picchu.
Mm.
I was supposed to go when I was 16 years old. I was a foreign exchange student and was supposed to go to Peru. And because of Shining Path, I think this must have been 1989, they closed off Peru to foreign exchange students, and I went to Paraguay. So I had all the plans of going to Machu Picchu, and, when I was 16, 15 maybe, and that didn't happen. So fast forward, I'm now 51. I've never been to Machu Picchu, and it's not an easy thing to do. The altitude is something that people struggle with, and I don't want to take the luxury route. I want to put physical effort in to get to the top. So that's why I want to do it when I'm young. I think it's just so much more rewarding, but also for somebody who is in her body, right? That's part of the experience.
Yeah. What does
So
it mean to be in your body? Do you feel like you're more in your body than you are in your head?
can they both be true?
Yeah.
Okay, I think they're both true for me.
Can you sit at your desk all day and write or work or
No,
and not exercise that whole
and
day?
it's funny that you say that because that was one of the reasons that I left my previous job, the one that didn't quite work out, is it was a lot of time sitting on Zoom. I was miserable because number one, I'm more of an in real life person. I need to move, I need to connect, I need to be out, I need to be looking people in the eyes. I felt like a trapped animal. Even my husband was like, this is not gonna work. It's not gonna work for you.
Something that happens in this stage of life where you really know yourself better, where when you're younger, like, why don't I like this or that? Or I'm going to work harder at liking it. And now I don't, no, that's not for
That's not
me.
gonna work. It's not gonna work.
I was going to ask you though, because I wanted to kind of get this full arc of a story about, I know you're not 100% sure yet, but why you started wanting to tell people about what you were going through or tell them stories about your life.
This is the way I see the world. I see it through a female lens, a powerful lens. I feel like the election, we got kicked in the teeth a little bit. And
For sure.
at the same time, I've been digging around women's health issues. It started with that conversation with Edie at Kripalu. Certainly, there's a lot going on with women's reproductive rights, women's rights. And not only did we get kicked in the teeth, but I didn't think it was going to turn out the way it did. And I feel very disappointed, and I still haven't reconciled in my head how to deal with this. I feel very disappointed that how do I say this? That people didn't vote for women. Not that they didn't vote for a woman, but that they didn't vote for women, right? That the issues that we have right now about bodily autonomy, not just autonomy, but the fact that women are dying and women will die, did not rise to the level of concern for a majority of people to vote on that.
91% of Black women voted for Kamala, and only 43% of white women voted for her.
I know.
Or white women voted for Donald Trump.
I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know how to deal with that. It also brings up a lot of issues. I'm very fortunate. I've never been sexually assaulted, but most of the women that I know have been. And I just don't know I don't know how to understand that because it just doesn't make any sense to me. And, I'm also a mother of two daughters.
Yeah, me
A
too.
2-year-old, a 22-year-old. So my 22-year-old is starting a career in medicine, and we're starting to think about, well, where can she go to school? Where could she do residency? Because there are certain states that she won't. And, my 20-year-old is fired up as hell right now. She plans to go into law. The day after the election, she signed up for law review. She signed up to be a volunteer at UVM's sexual assault crisis group. And she invited a huge group of women over to her apartment to have pasta that night because everybody was upset.
I had my first women's dinner party this weekend.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I had little candles everywhere, and I invited women who didn't know each other. One woman I'd never met myself, but we were connected through a friend of ours, like, you two have to meet. We never met. But they all came. It was 7 of us, and it was amazing. I'm really proud because I could tell that I had done a good thing. Because
Yeah,
everyone was so grateful and happy to be there. There was no agenda. There was no, it wasn't a meeting of any kind. It was just
right.
the wine
Yes.
was flowing and
Yeah.
conversations ranged from the very personal to
I
like,
think that's what we need right now.
I'm sick and tired of hiding away behind the screen.
That's maybe what prompted me to write, being hidden away, sitting around not talking, not sharing. The story that I tell about postpartum depression talks about healthcare and what we need right now. It's only through those stories, it's only through talking, it's only through getting together in person and being really honest and open about our experiences as women, whether we've had children, tried to have children, failed at having children. We need to talk about those so that the next election,
Yeah.
people will fucking care.
Yeah. I have a really close friend from childhood who voted for Trump. She has 2 daughters. She just is in this other echo chamber. They've been really successful at making people go down these very narrow paths. And it's too much to unpack for someone who thinks that way. She's not MAGA. She wasn't sitting at home being like, fuck women, I don't care. She's very dear to me, but it's too much for me to tell her to change her mind or shift her thinking. I think
Right.
that we need to hit rock bottom or something.
I love it that you say that because that's what I'm afraid of for our country right now is that we haven't hit rock bottom and it needs to get worse before people care enough, especially about how certain things will impact women.
I think we've come a long way in this reckoning. I think that we've changed a lot in our perspective about women overall. Like, we used to be really hard on ourselves and other women.
Absolutely.
I think that's shifting. We're all
Right.
culpable, judging
But,
each other and
and
ourselves.
it wasn't just men who burned witches. There were women there too. So that is definitely something to consider. I know that I feel a ton of support in my community and the people that I surround myself with. But to your point earlier about an echo chamber, that was a conversation I had with myself the day after the election because I could not believe what I was looking at. Like, I really felt because I live in this pocket where there's a lot of higher education, people who understand the impact of elections and political cycles and can see around corners. I'm in a culture here in the Boston area where most of the people think like I do. And if you're in my circle of friends, whether it be my immediate circle, my secondary circle, my tertiary circle, you're probably somebody who thinks like me. So I didn't see it coming. I really didn't. And I think being an optimistic person is really crushing. It is really, really, really crushing. And I started to think, do I want to expand my own community to include people who will give me a different perspective on issues like this? And at the end of the day, I decided I'm not willing to compromise my values.
Well, wait. You don't have to compromise your values. Maybe these people who think that Trump is just fine, they're either evil, stupid, or not paying attention. And I like to think that
But
people
I,
who
but I don't want any of those people in my circle. Like,
they
if
don't have to
you're
be,
evil,
they would, I'm
stupid,
not advocating for you hanging out,
right.
but I used to have this feeling like I could not stand it. I lived in very liberal places. The first time I was not in a liberal environment was when I moved to South Carolina for those years that I lived there. Now I'm in another little liberal bubble. I'm in North Carolina, but I'm in a purple dot in
Hmm.
North Carolina and Raleigh, and everyone around me is liberal. I live in a little cul-de-sac. We all have the signs.
Hmm.
My entire circle, they're all liberal. The only people I know are childhood friends that voted for Trump or were even close to that. And I also had 2 liberal parents. But I think this time around, even my own therapist was like, am I missing something? Is there something that I'm not seeing? Because as a critical thinker, you think, well, what am I missing here that so many people voted against their own interests and for fascism? And I think it's like kind of worth our time to just get through that logic that they're not the people who are just so far gone. And
Hmm.
But the other people to figure out how did this happen is important. Otherwise, how are we going to fix it? I don't know.
Right. Right. I think that's a super mature perspective, and I really appreciate that. My head isn't quite there yet.
The anthropologist in me wants to understand it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
There's this war on education, and that's very dangerous and scary. Being educated is framed as elitist. It should
Right.
be available to everybody. The death of critical thinking is the reason I believe this is happening and happened.
I thought that women would matter.
We never matter.
I know.
And we're so used to it. We always have to move over for something else.
Right. Be the movable piece. That's exactly right.
Yeah, like, oh, okay, oh yeah, later we'll get back to back of the line
Right.
again. We've done it to ourselves, and I think we're not doing it to ourselves anymore.
I'm
Right.
not.
I don't think Gen Z is, and I don't
No.
think my daughters will.
Mine aren't. If the stories that we tell help move some minds or influence directions, and I think they do. It's not just a cathartic process to release some of this stuff and put it out into the world. How do we take it from being one conversation at a time? It's going to be decades, centuries before we make any progress if we focus on baby steps.
I think the most important thing is what you did and are continuing to do, which is to be honest and give the gift of your own story.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That means so much. It really does.
I try to do the same with this podcast and kind of cut through the shit.
It feels really good to be in a position where you feel strong enough and you feel powerful enough to give up the perfectionism.
There's been stones laid on the path. It's like reframing witches. If you didn't have a husband and kids, you were a witch, basically. Like women
Right.
are disposed of in menopause. That's why we know nothing of menopause, because we were not important.
Exactly.
Now we're like, fuck off. Yes, we
Yeah.
are.
I think back to a couple of years ago and how I started building my network and some of the choices that I made in my communities and all that kind of stuff. I use the metaphor that I feel like I've been building an ark, like Noah's Ark, that something inside me said, build, connect, prepare. I don't know what it's for, but I know I'm supposed to do it. Now that I'm in this place, I think that momentum is starting to happen because I did build the ark. Right?
Yeah.
Hopefully there's not a storm coming. But
There
you
is,
never
though.
know what's
There definitely is a
you never know
storm
what's
coming.
around the corner.
I mean, literally and figuratively, there are storms coming. And we have this
storms
new
coming.
cabinet of a clown car coming.
That's kind of how I feel. That's the groove that I'm in life right now. And I feel so good. So I'm just going to keep doing it.
You've been listening to Actual People. This show is written, directed, and executive produced by me, your host, Chauncey Zalkin. Show sound designed by Eric Aaron. Click on the link below to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And don't forget to leave a review. I'll be sharing my favorites. You can find our socials and all links to deeper dives into these topics at chaunceyzalkin.com and on my Substack at chaunceyzalkin.substack.com. Actual People is available wherever you get your podcasts.